Hi everyone, I want to take the time today to review your answers from your quadrilaterals pre-assessment that you took on Friday. First of all, I hope that you have kind of read through the notes at the top, but also watched the video that's posted in today's folder that really does a nice job of explaining these different types of shapes and how they can be classified. I think that will help you a lot. So make sure you do those two things, as well as, listen to the rest of this video here to go over your answers from Friday. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few symbols that you're going to see on these shapes that you probably haven't seen before, and they can be kind of confusing if you don't know what they mean. So looking at number 1, that orange yellow box that you see in those corners, that means that that angle is 90 degrees. Okay, it kind of makes that L shape. So in both of those corners, we have 90-degree angles. If we would measure them, they would be 90 degrees. That green arrow looking symbol means that those lines that have them on it are parallel. So I'm going to highlight those lines. Okay, so this line is parallel to this line. That means that they go in the exact same direction, kind of like train tracks, but they're never going to cross. So they're never going to overlap each other. Okay, so those green arrows mean that those lines are parallel. The last symbol that you'll see in this shape is that red slash that's on that top line and the side line. That just means that those two lines are equal in length. So if we would kind of measure them, they would be the exact same length. If we would measure it and it would be 2 inches, then that line that has all the lines that have that one red dash would be 2 inches long. If we look at this guy, you can see that there's one line that has the red dash, and then there's those other 2 lines that have 2 red dashes. Those 2 red dashes mean that, okay, whatever line uses those 2 red dashes, then those lines are equal in length. So that would mean that this guy is equal to this guy, and that this guy is equal to this guy. So whichever lines are using the same number of red dashes, then they're equal in length. That's what that means. Looking also a little closely at this shape, in the corners, you can see how the angles are being measured. So that blue kind of half moon shape is the same blue half moon shape that's opposite to it. So that means that those angles, if we would measure those angles with a protractor, those angles would be equal. Same thing with these angles. Since there are 2 red kind of half moon shapes that are opposite to each other, that means that those angles are equal in measurement if we would use a protractor to measure them. So with that said, let's get started identifying and classifying these shapes. Okay, so I'm going to go through this a little quicker than I normally would, just so that you can get your answers written, but I just want you listening and making sure that your answers match mine in the end before you submit. Okay, so looking at number 1, we can classify number 1 as a quadrilateral and a trapezoid. Okay, a quadrilateral means it has 4 sides. A trapezoid means that it has 2 opposite sides that are parallel. So that would be a pair of parallel lines. Okay, the angles can be any degree, so they don't have to be the same for a trapezoid, and the sides can be any length. It just needs one pair of parallel sides. So for number 1, we would label that a quadrilateral and a trapezoid, so Q and T. For number 2, this guy is a quadrilateral, has 4 sides, and it's also a parallelogram. Parallelogram means that opposite sides are equal in length, so equal in length, and they're also parallel to each other. So you can see that green arrow means that they are parallel. So Number 2, we can classify as a quadrilateral and a parallelogram, a Q and a P. Number 3 is the same thing. Quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. Those opposite sides are equal in length and they are parallel. So once again, we can classify it as a parallelogram. So quadrilateral and a parallelogram. All right, let's look at number 4. Oop, ignore my 9 here. I was doing some work before this. All right, number 4 has a few different classifications. It can be a quadrilateral, has 4 sides. It can be a parallelogram. Those opposite sides are parallel. It can also be a rectangle. Okay, that means that it has 90 degrees. All of those angles are 90 degrees. It can also be a rhombus. A rhombus just means that those opposite sides are equal. And it can also be a square. So a square, all of the opposite sides are equal and it has 90 degrees. So this guy can be a lot of different things. So if you notice, when we want to label these shapes a rhombus, they want us to use the letter H since we already use an R for rectangle. So going over to number 4 here to list our answers, we said it's a quadrilateral. It can be classified as a parallelogram. It can be classified as a rhombus, which we're using H to label as rhombus. It can be classified as a rectangle and a square. We got a lot for number 4. Number 5 is a little bit different, okay? It has sides that are the same length and they are adjacent to each other. So that means that they touch each other. Those 2 sides are touching and adjacent. They're equal in length. There's another pair of sides that are equal in length and adjacent to each other, meaning they're touching. There's also the angles across from each other that are the same measurement. So that makes this guy a quadrilateral because it's 4 sides, and it also makes it a kite. Okay, so for number 5, we're going to label it a quadrilateral and a kite. And guess what? Number 6 is the same. Adjacent sides are equal in length. And it has 1 pair of opposite angles that are equal in measurement. So number 6 is a kite and a quadrilateral. All right, moving right along here, we have number 7. Number 7, we're going to classify as a quadrilateral, has 4 sides. We're also going to classify it as a parallelogram. Those opposite sides are equal. And it can also be classified as a rhombus because those opposite angles are also equal to each other. Okay, so number 7, navigate myself over here. Number 7 is a quadrilateral, a parallelogram, and a rhombus. Remember, we're using H to show that it's a rhombus. All right, moving on to number 8. Okay, this one's a little bit funky. It only has 1 symbol, and remember that symbol means that it is that angle is 90 degrees. So it can't be a square. A square needs 4 90-degree angles. It can't be a rectangle. A rectangle needs 4 90-degree angles. It also can't be a parallelogram because those opposite sides are not parallel. It can't be a rhombus because those opposite angles aren't equal. Okay, so the only thing that we can classify number 8 is a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. So for number 8, the only symbol we are going to use is Q for quadrilateral. Number 9 is the same. It has no equal sides, no parallel sides, no opposite angles that are the same. Okay, so the only thing we can classify number 9 as is as a quadrilateral. So for number 9, use a Q to label it as a quadrilateral. All right, number 10, is a quadrilateral, has 4 sides. We can also say that number 10 is a parallelogram. Those opposite sides are equal in length. We can also say that it is a rhombus because the opposite angles are equal in length. Okay? So it can be 3 shapes: quadrilateral, parallelogram, and rhombus. Remember, we're using H for rhombus. 2 more. Number 11. It can be a quadrilateral, it can be a parallelogram, and this guy is also a rectangle. Okay? Opposite sides are equal in length, and it has 90-degree angles. 4 90-degree angles make it a rectangle. You might be thinking, well, why couldn't it be a square? And I want you to think about what the difference between a square and a rectangle is. A square needs all sides to be the same length. Okay? So that's what makes it different from a square. These sides, even though the opposite sides are equal to each other, do you see how they use 1 red bar for the top and the bottom side, and they use 2 red dashes or red bars to label the right and left side of the rectangle? That means that all of those sides are different lengths. So number 11 can only be classified as a quadrilateral, a parallelogram, the opposite sides are parallel, and a rectangle, not a square. All right, lastly, number 12, he's kind of like number 8 and number 9, okay? No parallel lines, no equal lines, no equal angles. This guy only has 4 sides, so we can only identify him and classify him as a quadrilateral. Q. Hopefully that helped going over that together here. Make sure your answers match mine, and then you can submit your work to the assignment in today's folder. I think it's called Quadrilaterals Pre-Assessment Corrections. Okay, thanks for following along.